Well, CBN's chief political analyst David Brody is joining us now. David, the clock's ticking. What do you think the president's next move is going to be?
Well, he's hoping, Pat, that they're going to come to some sort of deal in the next couple weeks here. I say they. We're talking about a 17-member bipartisan group of House Democrats and also Senate Democrats and Senate Republicans and House Republicans. But look, I don't think there's much chance that they're going to get exactly what the president wants. So the question then becomes, what do they come up with, and will it be enough for the president to take? And I have a feeling, Pat, the way this is going, and I've been in Washington, for a decent amount of time, maybe too long, Pat. Look, he's not getting his $5.7 billion. And if he is getting anywhere near that, it sure isn't for a wall. The question then becomes, what is the package? My sense of it is that there's going to be some money for fencing, barriers, steel slats, Lego pieces, whatever you want to call it. But the point simply is that there'll be some money there, but it won't be. And here's the key, Pat. Donald Trump has wanted wall prototypes. You know, all of these things that he's debuting at the San Diego border. He says, look at these beautiful walls. Not going to be any of that. I think what it's going to end up being is some existing fencing that the government has already approved back in the day of the Secure Fence Act. And I think if that's the case, then that'll be part of the bargain. And also, I don't think it's going to be 5.7. It might be $1 million, $2 million. And the question is that going to be enough for the president to take?
Well, this whole idea of him declaring a national emergency and taking money away from the Defense Department, what do you think on that one?
Well, it's the hip pocket strategy. I mean, he can do it. It'll be challenged in court right away. There's no doubt about it. But look, I mean, most of at least the constitutional experts, most of them side on the fact that the president can do this. The question is, would it even get through the liberal courts? Because you know it's going to be challenged most likely in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, the liberal bastion out there in San Francisco. And so, Look, he's going to try to do it, and he can do it. Here's the truth of the matter. You can't imagine Donald Trump in 2020 going to all of these big rallies running for president saying, you know, I tried, but I really couldn't get it done. I'm sorry. That's not going to work. Donald Trump's going to try and figure out how to build this wall. If Congress won't do it, he will definitely go the national emergency route. But of course, Pat, as you know, the danger with that is a Democrat president comes along and all of a sudden climate change is this national emergency where you have to dip into funds. And it could open up a whole a big, huge Pandora's box.
You know, there's a woman named Ann Coulter. She said once upon a time that I was, quote, the Jim Jeffords of the Republican Party. People like that are just so far on the right hand, and yet they're excoriating the president for being the president. He had to open the government. He had to do it. Is he listening to these people on the right, do you think?
Well, I don't think he's listening to Ann Coulter anymore. He unfollowed her on Twitter back in December. Look, Ann Coulter has always been about, wait for it, Ann Coulter. I mean, she says provocative things. And I was on Fox and Friends yesterday morning, and I said she's off her rocker. And you know what? She is off her rocker. I mean, she represents a far right portion of that 35% base we hear about all the time that Donald Trump has. It's not representative of, for sure, that evangelical army that got him elected. As a matter of fact, I know that from just looking at my Twitter feed and all of the comments coming in. Everybody's saying he didn't cave. He'll figure it out. He hasn't broken promises before. He'll make sure that wall gets done. But look, even if he doesn't get the wall done because it gets held up, let's say, in the courts, they believe, those evangelicals believe that he's fighting as hard as he possibly can. And I think ultimately this could help him politically as we move down the road in 2020.
You know, he's got a State of the Union. He'll have a platform that he can lay out a whole host of the things that he's done. Well, what do you think the strong points that he needs to emphasize in the State of the Union?
Well, it'll center on humanitarian assistance. I don't think there's a question about that. That's going to be number one for him. And then after that, look, you go down the line, Pat. I mean, you have to think about some of the things that he's already said in that Oval Office address. But the truth of the matter is it's going to be very, very difficult to change really anybody's minds at this point. Look, I think everybody's dug in. And at this point, I don't think there's much he can do to change anything. I think it's interesting how he's handled Nancy Pelosi in this situation. You know, he says his nickname for Nancy is Nancy. I mean, he doesn't say anything, unlike crying Chuck and a few other folks. And I think there's a reason for that. I think he respects her. I think he thinks she's a fighter just like him. She's a survivor. And if you notice, Pat, what he does with Nancy Pelosi, it's very, very interesting. A lot of times on Twitter, you always hear him talk about the Republicans and say it's such a thing of beauty how the Republicans stuck together. He respects Nancy Pelosi because think what you might about her. Bottom line is she gets those Democrats to stick together, and he respects that.
One last thing. The acting attorney general has said he thinks the Mueller probe is going to wind down. I've heard that from Jay Sekulow and others. He's about at the end of the line. What do you hear about that?
Right. I think they are at the end of the line here, Pat, and I think that is going to come. It's all going to happen very soon. I think the question now becomes, does that report become public? Now, I think a lot of folks would laugh at that point and say, well, of course it's going to become public. And I think eventually it will. But technically, as you know, Pat, it's not supposed to be. It'll go to the Justice Department and it'll go from there. This thing will be leaked out. The question then just becomes, you know, how much does the White House fight some of this to become public? How much does Congress? It depends what's obviously in it. And so that's a big part of the fight. Also, even if there's no Russian collusion in this report, remember, federal and state prosecutors could have potential cases here when it comes to campaign finance violations. So even if this whole Mueller investigation clears the president of Russian collusion, it doesn't necessarily mean this is over for the president when it comes to federal and state prosecutors dealing with what Michael Cohen said about campaign finance violations.
Well, I think we're all a little tired of hearing about this investigation. Is dragged on forever and ever and ever, but Mueller is sure indicted. What they did, you know, it used to be the big firm was Black, Manafort, and Stone. They were the big political operatives of the right some years ago, and now Manafort is in jail, and they raided Roger Stone, and I guess Charlie Black's the only one that's kind of stayed clear of the fight. What do you think? Don't you think they went all over the top in having those people raid Stone's house in the early morning?
Well, for sure, there's a lot of pushback on that, Pat. And, you know, look, Roger Stone was definitely not any sort of risk to flee the country. If anything, the only thing he would be moving towards is not another country, but another microphone. I mean, he loves the attention. So this idea that the FBI would come in guns a-blazing, if you will, or at least guns at the ready, seemed a bit over the top. But it also does question, I know a lot of folks have said, you know, CNN, it was just good journalism that they were there. Look, I mean, good journalism or not, no one's having necessarily a problem with the fact that, you know, they're working their sources. But it's interesting, who are those sources? Because once again, we get into this idea that is there, you know, this deep state portion of what people believe, which is that the FBI tipping off liberal CNN and everybody kind of working together to get the beautiful video of Roger Stone and the FBI that morning. So I think that's more the issue that folks are having.
David, thanks for your insights. Come back soon. God bless you.
Anytime.